Hey Andrew,
Yo, what's up, Eliseo? How's it going, man?
not bad. Enjoying the first hints of summer
Yeah,
here in
yeah, yeah.
Texas.
Yeah, no, we got some really good weather in Houston too. So I was telling you earlier, I went for a walk, kind of for the first time in a long time. Actually, it's just been like super busy, but yeah, I'm glad I got a chance to get outside and enjoy the weather a little bit. So, how was your week, man?
It's been busy, dude. It's been busy. We'll get into it, but thesis writing it's a labor of love. Um, yeah,
Nah,
maybe some hate too, but
I would imagine there's a lot of hate involved in
yeah,
that. I just
a little bit, a little bit.
No, definitely. I'm trying to finish up this manuscript for his journal submission, and it's just like I don't want to do it, but you got to do it, kind of grind it out, and going through the reviewers' comments and stuff that takes forever. But I
Which
sympathize with you.
and those reviewer comments are they're very empathetic, aren't they? They
Yeah,
understanding and know respectful of your time.
yeah, all of that, right? Um, but cool, man. Yeah, so I'm glad. So this is like the So last couple of weeks, you interviewed me, kind of gave my background story to how I got here. I'm excited now. I'm getting to be in the interviewer for getting a chance to get a behind the scenes look at Eliseo Iglesias and how you came to be. So, but before we get into that, first, let you know, welcome everybody to the podcast. This is Custom Journeys. My name is Andrew Baines. This is Eliseo Iglesias. We're here to really just for to expand the outreach of STEM and how STEM can be important, and actually try to expose minorities to STEM education. So really, we're here to encourage people to pursue STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and talk about different people's journeys in their path towards pursuing a career in STEM. So we're thankful, grateful to have the wonderful special guest this week, Eliseo. So, Eliseo, again, hello, welcome, and let's go ahead and get into it. All right.
Yeah, no, it's nice to be here, fellow co-host. Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, so let's go ahead and first start talking about. We're gonna kind of start with the end in mind, and then we'll kind of back up, rewind a little bit to talk about like how we got to where you're at now in your journey in your career path. But so, what do you currently do? Where do you currently work? What are you kind of working on right now?
Right. No, so it's a bit of a story. I essentially have two jobs at the moment. The first job, I am a PhD student at the University of Texas at San Antonio, mechanical engineering, pursuing a PhD in mechanical engineering. And I am ABD. So what that means is I am all but dissertation. I've completed all my coursework, I passed my proposal, I have successfully defended my thesis. Right now, I just got to finish writing the book. At the same time, I am a part-time lecturer at Trinity University here in San Antonio, and I teach a couple courses, or I teach a course. I've been teaching at least a course or two every year for the last 3 years in their engineering science department.
Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
ABD, everything but dissertation. So,
Mm-hmm.
how is that dissertation writing process going? When do you think you'll be done with everything there?
That's a question I try to actively avoid answering. But no, so anyone can tell you it's kind of like, and I know I joked when I said it's been like writing a book, but it really is. Uh, I think it's best said. I think this is a common phrase. There's no such thing as a finished work, just a work that's turned in, right? There's
Okay.
no such thing as a polished work. Um, so no, right now I am about maybe 80%, 3/4 of the way finished, and I'm going to make sure that I finish by the end of the semester. It's gonna
All
happen.
right.
It's gonna happen one way or the other.
Nice, nice. No, I like to ask all PhD students that question because
It's
if you get the common trend right of like either I don't know or it's like is to be determined, or so I like to kind of see people squirm a little bit when you ask them that question.
Oh yeah, we definitely love that getting at question.
Yeah. Okay, so you got an interesting you're at an interesting point right now. You've reached a pretty significant milestone. You finished up all your coursework. You've already successfully defended your research. Now you're just kind of putting the finishing touches on your dissertation. That's awesome. So you're at the finish line of getting a PhD in mechanical engineering. So I would like to really like take a deep dive into like how we got to where you're at now, right? Because
Whew.
I'd imagine when you were a young boy growing up in the Houston, Texas area, I don't really think you saw yourself as a PhD student or getting a PhD one day. But I could be wrong. But let's kind of get into how you started out and like even going back as far as like when you were a kid. What was your dream job or like what do you want to be when you grew up?
Okay, gotcha. So my dream growing up was probably to be was to be a scientist, straight up scientist. It
Okay.
wasn't necessarily an engineer.
Yeah.
So I am of the generation of people that grew up watching Bill Nye the Science Guy and Beakman's World. I don't know if you remember those old shows.
Not the second one.
Okay, maybe the second one's like on cable. I don't know. Growing up, I didn't have cable, so it was mostly Bill Nye on PBS,
Yeah.
um, Channel 8 for those of you in
Hmm.
Houston. Uh, so I definitely saw myself being a scientist. You know, when I was a kid, I remember I there's a when I was in elementary school, my mom and my teacher told me that I one time for like show and tell, I looked up the I presented to the class in an article in a encyclopedia that talked about subatomic particles. This is no joke. I know you're smiling, but I actually did this where they talked about electrons and protons and even quarks, which are the components of those elemental particles. And I tried to explain this to the class, and the class was just like, "What are you talking about?" And yeah, so that's really, I think that was a sign. Things to come.
Yeah.
So this was like fourth or fifth grade. Um, and it was after that point that, you know, my mom in particular really saw my potential, my interest in science and tried to nurture that.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
man, that's a little surprising and I think it's very unique. You kind of remind me of like a young Sheldon from like Big Bang Theory kind of, the I don't know if you watch that show. I don't really watch it, but I'm familiar with it. Um but yeah, like I you don't meet very many people that like from a very young age they kind of know, okay, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I want to do, and then they actually go on to do those things. So that's pretty interesting. And kudos to mom, right? For identifying that, hey, this is a passion that Eliseo has. So let's try to put him in the best position to achieve whatever he wants to pursue. So, so you start.
I like to think not as pretentious as Sheldon, but okay. Sorry, go keep going.
No, that's cool. So, so yeah, so you start off young kid, fourth, fifth grade. You're like, yo, you already know in your mind you want to be a scientist. Um, and you grew up in Houston, like elementary, middle school, high school, right? Or suburbs, or where'd you kind of grow up at specifically? Just because I'm familiar with the city.
Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated, but pretty much yes. I was born in Houston. I grew up in Southwest Houston, but I moved around between different neighborhoods, between Alief and Missouri City.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I so really quickly growing up, I grew up in a suburban household. My parents got divorced, and then I lived with my mom and my sister in single parent situation in Alief. So
Okay.
yeah, so there's a little bit of moving around due to circumstances, but yeah, I pretty much grew up in Houston, Southwest
Gotcha.
Houston.
Southwood. Okay, so you would have been zoned to like an LSIC, or if you would have stayed in that area, like LSIC or
I,
Hastings, or maybe
I,
a Taylor.
I think I was zoned to Hastings, and then when I
Okay.
moved to Missouri City, I was zoned to Willowridge.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I told you my wife went to Hightower, so I'm familiar with, well, I'm from Houston anyway, so I'm
Yeah.
familiar with all the areas. But okay, cool. So you actually, when you got to high school though, based on what I know, the research I did on LinkedIn, you didn't actually go to any of those schools, right? You actually went to Strake Jesuit.
Yeah, I was very, and I can get into this later, but I definitely feel my career path is um, unique and um, fortunate and blessed and all those things because I didn't go to public school after
Yeah.
elementary school. For middle school, I went to a charter school called KIPP Academy because my mom wanted, and like any mother would want for their child the best education possible. And she just saw the schools that are out there, and she said, let's go ahead and try to enroll them in a private school or in a charter school. And because of KIPP, I was able to get a great education and apply to one of these private schools in Houston. You know, you had Strake, you had Second Baptist, you have Episcopal High School, all these schools that consistently were accepting KIPP students. And so I ended up getting into Strake Jesuit. Myself and maybe a couple of my peers, like maybe half a dozen KIPP students ended up going that year. But yeah, I went to Strake Jesuit, which is a private school, private Catholic university. And the full name is Strake Jesuit College Prep. And I can tell you, I definitely felt college ready going into college because of Strake.
Cool. Awesome. So let's talk about that. So, um, young Latino male, dreams of being a scientist, growing up in a single parent home. Um, you thankfully your mom enrolls you in KIPP. You get a chance to apply to private school, pretty good private school here in Houston. What is your experience like in at Strake Jesuit from both like an educational standpoint and then also from like a social standpoint? How are you kind of like fitting in and getting along with people at the school?
Wow. So that's again that it's a little bit complicated, but pretty much so Strake Jesuit, the demographics at Strake are completely different from the demographics of everywhere else I've been previously. Elementary school. It's actually interesting that you mentioned that. If I can go back 2 steps in elementary school, one of the reasons why my mom wanted me to go to KIPP was because um, she wanted me to be fully immersed uh, in an environment where I would learn Spanish. That was very important to her. My parents are both they were undocumented immigrants from Central America. And so for them, it was very important for that some semblance of the culture to be retained as I grew up, in an American society. And so at my elementary school, there wasn't a gifted and talented program available for students that were bilingual or students that were Spanish only. It was only for English only. And so my mom didn't allow me to join the GT class for that reason. She knew fully well I would qualify and excel, but she wanted me to learn Spanish first and
Gotcha.
retain some semblance of that culture. So then after that, she said, another teacher recommended KIPP, where was a essentially, a charter school with a private school quality education, but we're focusing on, Latinos and Black students.
Mhm.
So I wound up going to KIPP. Now, when I went to Strake, completely different story. I definitely felt like the minority. I felt a little bit out of place going there, and a little bit of culture shock being around, light complected individuals. But at the end of the day, though, I would say I learned a lot about that culture, and that in some ways prepared me for what I saw later on in college.
Okay, that's interesting. So that's again, I think your mom really identified like what's important to her and what would be important to you as well as you got older, and that's instilling a confidence in your culture and your heritage, right? So I think she did a good job of kind of laying that foundational work, that you have that good foundation, knowing that in the future, when you're going off into your career, you're going to be immersed in multicultural environments where it's not going to just be Latinos, but building that foundation kind of gave you that confidence, I would think, to kind of be secure in who you are and have a great appreciation for your culture set. That's really good.
Yeah, shout out to the moms. I know we talked about, your mom and how she influenced your last week, so shout out to the
Yeah.
moms.
Okay. So you said the experience at Drake was very different socially compared to Kip. What about from a classroom standpoint? I know you kind of made the comment that you really felt like you were ready for college um, by the time you graduated from Drake. Was it based? What do you think kind of made that the case? Was it the workload? Was it the pace that you guys worked at? What do you think kind of prepared you? What do you think it was about Drake that really prepared you for success in college?
The expectations were higher of the students. There were not just AP courses, but there were what were termed accelerated courses. And I ended up taking many accelerated, especially math and science. I think in particular math courses, I took them all as accelerated, and then I took AP calculus. Um, the discipline, I think, helped. Since it was a Catholic private school, we had to wear khakis with a belt and a button down. I couldn't have my hair this long. Um, and I think, at the time that, that discipline seemed kind of trivial, but that really carried over well in college, I think, having that type of mentality or knowing how to flex those discipline muscles when I needed them to in college. So yeah, I think that having higher expectations and access to higher quality classes in high school was beneficial for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so those accelerated programs or accelerated courses, how are those different from AP courses? Is it literally just the amount of material you may learn in 2 semesters in a regular classroom, you're learning in 1 semester in an accelerated course? Is that pretty much it, or is there something more to it?
I think there's something more to it. I think you got me in a gotcha question there. If I recall, those had I think the only difference was, and I might be wrong. I have to look back, but I think the only difference was the course content was equivalent to an AP,
Hmm.
but there wasn't an AP test required. I think essentially that's what it was. And it was very much recommended to take AC courses in preparation of a fully fledged AP course. So
Okay.
AP courses were reserved for, I think, for Calculus 1. And so before that, you can take AC Algebra, AC Algebra 2, AC Geometry, etc. And so it was encouraged to take those in preparation for an AP type course. I think that was the defining difference, if I recall
Okay.
correctly. This is in high school, man. This is a while ago.
I know, right? Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit to the end of your high school career.
Okay.
So when you were getting ready to graduate, what schools were you looking at applying to? What majors were you looking at, and kind of how are you making those decisions related to graduation?
So I will be the first to admit my thinking process at the time wasn't as sophisticated as I would have liked. But I think so. That's why I mentioned my career path through my education was very fortunate because I had a lot of resources at my disposal. So at Strake, I had a college counselor, and at Strake, every college counselor was assigned to no more than 15 students, which is an insane number for those of you that are in public school,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Um, and so because of that, I was able to have a lot of dialogue with my college counselor. And I'll give her a shout out right now. Her name is Suhe Romero. She doesn't work there anymore. She works at another school. I think she works at St. Agnes, actually. But she was my counselor, and she was actually the one that guided me through this process and educated me on this process. And so without her, I would be totally head over heels. I would be totally lost in the process. So she was the one that was pushing me to apply. Because at the end of the day, I applied to Trinity University, I applied to HBU, and I believe I applied to U of H. And there might have been a fourth one. Oh, yeah, I applied to Rice. I didn't apply to a whole lot of schools, to be honest. Oh, yeah, and St. Thomas. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. majority private schools, right? That you were looking at going to instead of like so you kind of you felt comfortable, or what made you identify those schools that you picked? Was it a particular program that you were interested in? And I guess let me back up before that. So
Hmm.
your counselor, you're working with her. She's doing a great job, kind of pushing you to apply.
Hmm.
At this point, did you already know, like, hey, I want to be a mechanical engineer? Did you fully understand what engineering was? What programs were you interested in, and how did you kind of make the decision as far as what to major in?
The thought of my major didn't really come until I started going to college. In high school, I really had already set in mind the best path to find a best path to become a scientist. And so,
Okay.
in some ways, I've kind of, I not kind of, I convinced myself that I think I'm gonna get my PhD. I think this is what I want to do. I need a PhD if I want to do actual science. But I didn't know at the time, if that would go through, physics route or engineering route or computer science route. I didn't know. I just knew that I liked doing experiments. I want to wear the lab coat, and I was going to do everything I can to get there.
Oh
It was
boy.
really, honestly, it's as simple as that. I really had that convinced myself. And, if you ask my family, they'll tell you, yep, little Ellie just wanted to be a scientist for the longest time.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna pivot a little bit just because I want to know a little bit more about your desires to be a scientist.
Yeah.
Were there like any specific problems you wanted to solve? Because a lot of kids like they're like, yo, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a police officer, I want to be a lawyer, a doctor, or not
Yeah.
a lawyer, a doctor, or a football player, something like that. It's more so like generalized. But I think your interest to be a scientist is interesting and unique, starting from a young age. But there like one particular problem that you wanted to address?
Oh, I wanted to be an astronaut.
Okay,
Absolutely, astronaut. And I found out that most of the astronauts or doctorates have their PhD. And
gotcha.
the moment I found that out, I thought, okay, I need to go get my PhD. You know,
Okay.
but yeah, I wanted to. I think growing up, I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to be an astronaut. I just wanted to do. I wanted to build spaceships. I think that's what I wanted to do.
Nah, that's
I think that's
cool.
the. I think that's the problem I wanted to solve.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Awesome. So you were born in the right city then, right? I mean,
Yeah, Space City, baby.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so cool. So your counselor does a great job working with you, saying, "Hey, Eliseo, you got to apply to these schools." She's pushing you, encouraging you to do what you want to, which
In
to.
particular, sorry to interrupt. In particular, she pushed me to apply to Trinity. Like I
Okay.
applied to HBU and St. Thomas, and
Yeah.
maybe I didn't answer this question earlier, but I focused on within the city, schools within the city, because I
Okay.
didn't want to move away too far away from my family at the time. But then she pushed me to go for Trinity.
Hmm. Awesome. Okay. And what made her identify Trinity as like a good school?
She was an alum
Or
herself.
okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
All right, that's cool.
So now we can
Okay.
start talking about networking. But sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, that's good though. Okay, awesome. So Trinity, so what kind of made your mind up as far as Trinity? Like what did you get a chance to go out there and visit the campus and you're like, okay, yeah, I like this versus like U of H or St. Thomas or HBU or whatever.
Yeah, I went to Trinity University one of their visiting days. There's a word for it. It's at the top of my tongue. I'll think of it. But they have days where they invite students to come and visit, and even stay on campus and allow a current student to host them, host high
That's
school
cool.
students, right, to like sleep over and etc. And I just remember um, the most the tour that gave me the had the most impact on me was the engineering tour. I remember it like yesterday. I had our speaker for that day to introduce to us the engineering curriculum was Dr. Mabubuddin, and he's a very charismatic Indian man, or sorry, I'm sorry, Bangladesh. Forgive me if I forget which country he's from, but he was a very charismatic person, and he had so much energy. And essentially, he convinced all of us that engineers, they create the world. He managed to like I remember this anecdote. He said, "You know that chair you're sitting in? An engineer designed that chair."
Mm.
You know, engineers create the world. Don't you want to be an engineer? You know,
Yeah.
so and I remember that being very impactful. And I thought, maybe I'll give this a shot. And so I said, I'll just go for it.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm glad you brought him up, and then also your counselor. So they both seem like that professor you mentioned, maybe on a smaller scale because it was just that one interaction, but your counselor on a bigger scale because you kind of worked with her over the years and she really encouraged you to pursue Trinity. But it seems like you started to kind of have some good mentors and role models in your life that kind of help push you along to up to this point. I know you probably had some more later on in college and then even after college. Um, were there any other role models at this point that are really like encouraging you to pursue STEM, or any people that you just kind of identified as, oh, that's a really cool Latino engineer or astronaut or whatever the case may be, that kind of encouraged you?
Yeah. So the first person that put the idea in my head that a PhD was possible or a legitimate career path was actually my pastor, Dr. Sandy Williams. Rest in peace. He passed away a couple years ago. But he's the one, my mom can tell you, I would ask him questions like, what is a doctorate? What does that mean? How'd you get your doctorate? Because I would see his title at church and it says Dr. Sandy Williams. So like, that sounds cool. And then I would inquire about it. And I remember him always encouraging me to keep, working hard. Sometimes he'll kick in a couple bucks here to pay for my textbooks. And yeah, just these small micro, not microaggressions, but maybe micro blessings, maybe you can call them. But yeah, no. So these, I would absolutely list him as a role model that inspired me to keep going. Definitely my mother, because she's a very stubborn person. I'll just put it nicely, as nice as I can, as nicely I can. So I think her insistence on my education. No, for real talk, she has a very militant attitude when it comes to education, and maybe
Okay.
that comes from being a first generation immigrant. Because I've spoken to and it's not just in Latinos, also in the Black community. Black immigrants also have this militant mentality towards education. But she's the one that really pushed me, and it was actually her attitude that I probably through osmosis absorbed growing
Gotcha.
up. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. All right. So yeah, I'm a double back to that, especially like mom. I want to know a little bit more about her, but or maybe that's another day, right? Where we bring the moms
I want to
on.
write a book about her story, but yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so you visit Trinity, spend the night, couple nights there. You hang out. Um, I don't know, you partying, enjoying your visit, your visit as a high school student. But no, you decide to go to Trinity. So when you get to Trinity, do you automatically enroll in engineering based on your conversations with some of the professors that you talk to, or are you still kind of undecided, on the fence a little bit, or what's your kind of thought process once you get to Trinity?
So something about me, and I think maybe I got this from my mom. When I commit to something, I am 100% committed to it. It's very hard for me to say no, even if it's detrimental to me, which I'll get into later. So at that moment, I said, you know what? If I'm going to do this engineering thing, I'm just going to do it full commit. Because I have a feeling it'll be a lot more difficult to switch from something else to engineering than to
Mm-hmm.
switch from engineering to something else, if that makes sense.
No, 100%.
So I said, if I do engineering, after that, if I still want to be a physicist or do a science, I can still do that. So let me go ahead and do this. And also on top of that, it seemed as though engineering science is one of the more difficult tracks that you can take on campus at Trinity. Not to put down other majors, other than music. Music majors have it the roughest, I would have to say. But I definitely thought I think I'm up to that challenge. I want to challenge myself in that way. So yeah,
Awesome.
I committed at the very start to engineering.
Okay. Awesome. So when you get there, luckily it's still in state, right? So same state. So state in you're again in state tuition,
Hmm.
but it is a private school. So I'm assuming it's a little bit more expensive than traditional just state schools, right?
Yes.
Uh, are you how you gonna pay for school? Like you getting scholarships, you getting Pell Grant, you getting I don't know, Stafford loans,
Selling
all that,
plasma.
all that. How you doing it?
So again, I got very very lucky, or a lot of things went my way. Um, so Trinity, yes, was by far the most expensive school out of all the schools I was accepted into. By the way, I was accepted by all the schools except for Rice. Rice straight up rejected me. Just gonna put that out there.
I'm gonna have to talk to them, man. I
Yeah.
got you. Let
Can
me
you,
let me put in a word.
can you talk to the manager? um, but but Trinity by far, yeah. So they were the most expensive, but at the same time, they gave me the most scholarship money out of all of the universities, out of HBU, St. Thomas University, I think U of H. Out of all those schools, Trinity still surpassed by the amount of scholarship dollars I was given. I still had to take out quite a bit of loans. I have to say, if I had to put in a percentage, it was like 80-20, 80% scholarships, 20% loans every year for 4 years.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I got Pell Grants, I got grants from the state government, I got Trinity money and loans to pay for school.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So 80-20, this number is ingrained in my head. It's like $22,000 number, like the expected cost of tuition and fees at UTSA back in like 2009, 2010, so to speak. So around roughly around 22 grand per year
Mm-hmm.
for school. That's like tuition fees, all the other stuff. What if you remember, do you recall what the tuition and fees were at Trinity?
So one thing to keep in mind about Trinity, they do have a 3 year on-campus living requirement. Since it's a small
Uh,
school, they require all the underclassmen to live on campus. Um, some juniors are allowed in special circumstances to live off campus, and seniors are absolutely allowed to live off campus. So every year when we calculate the budget, we have to take that into account. Is tuition and room and board. So with all that combined, that was about, I think, around 36K per year.
okay.
And then my senior year, without having to pay for room and board, that was 32K. But then you still have to pay for rent and everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely more expensive than UTSA. So that 22 number, the 22,000 was like tuition fees, room and board. So yeah, Trinity is definitely more expensive. But so it's good. It's really great that you got roughly 80% of that covered. I hear a lot of stories. I've heard some stories of people getting like six figures, um, student loan debt amounts, and you're like, I don't know how I'm ever going to pay this off. So I'm glad you were fortunate enough to, and some of it's based on merit, of course, right? But then I'm glad there were opportunities there for you to get that scholarship and federally funded money that didn't come with a bunch of student loans attached to it. Even though that 20%, I'm sure racking up that interest on that, it can add up pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, cool. So you get your finances in order, paying for school. How was your undergraduate experience? Is it about 4.5, 5 years to graduate, and how does that overall experience as an undergrad student in mechanical engineering?
Whew. Yeah, so it was 4 years. I think if I needed to do another semester or two, I don't think I would have been able to afford it, to be honest with you, because a lot of the Pell grants and Texas grants were year dependent. Like I know the Texas grant, I forget what it's called. It's like Texas Secondary Education Grant. Um, that was only for year one, year two, year three. I think there was a year four program, and the Pell grants were the same. There wasn't any grants available for like a fifth year. So I definitely would have had to finish in 4 years. And the degree, fortunately, is designed to be completed in 4 years. But it was very intense, right? The courses are intense. On top of that, Trinity is a liberal arts institution. and so there is a component to the curriculum that is dedicated to the humanities, um, and which is different from if you go to A&M or UT for engineering. Most of those courses are definitely engineering specific. But at Trinity, you are required a little bit more than other institutions to take more liberal arts courses, which I completely, looking back, I'm completely okay with. I think it's important to be well rounded. Um, my experience, it was similar to my experience at Strike, where I at first felt uncomfortable because I felt out of place. Maybe a bit of imposter syndrome set in. I remember my first year, I struggled quite a bit because I was living on campus on my own for the first time away from my family. And all my roommates, I'll just say it, all my roommates were white. And my suite mates were white. And it's not that they weren't nice to me, it's just a different culture, right? And so I remember having long nights on the phone with my family or old friends of mine from middle school, just helping me, keep my mind together, keep sanity, and just complaining about my roommates and etc. So, I mean, it was a struggle my first year. I'd be lying if I didn't admit that to get over some of that culture shock.
Yeah, no, that's always interesting, right? Like the dynamics of living together with strangers. Um, it is really interesting. I remember I had three other roommates my freshman year. And it was like we're all from, I think three of us were from Houston. One was from down in the valley, towards like Harlingen, Texas. It was me, two Latino guys, and one Indian guy. But I mean, it's like a really interesting like melting pot. But I think I got like a more diverse experience. But even with that, I got a chance to kind of see other cultures a little bit and experience those up close and personal. But yeah, I think you kind of had maybe you had a similar experience, but maybe yours wasn't as diverse as my experience was. So you
Absolutely.
more of a learning process overall.
If I can add another aspect of this that I think is not talked about enough. So yeah, definitely culturally it was very different, but also class. Okay,
Yeah.
I come from a blue collar immigrant family, and and not to put down my peers, but they were all from well to do families. Some of them affluent, that didn't have to worry about the problems my family had to deal with. So that was also, in other words, when people ask me, "Did you ever watch Nickelodeon as a kid?" I'm like, What's Nickelodeon? I didn't grow up with cable, and then I would miss out on those references. So it was not just race, but also I have to say class. That was also a shock for me.
Yeah. No, that's a real one. That's a true one. I think that may be in some cases like even more substantial, like the different like theories and mindsets of people like in one class versus another.
Hmm.
I remember I had one roommate. He would like just be sitting in the living room playing Guitar Hero, and we had some of the same class. I was like, "Yo, you're not gonna go to class with me?" He's like, "No, I'll he's just playing the Guitar Hero. Like, I'll just catch you later." And he's like, "Sometimes I feel guilty." He's like, "Sometimes I feel guilty about not going to class." And he's like, "My parents are sending checks for me to go to school, and I'm just like playing Guitar Hero." And I'm like, "Yeah, you think like you might want to." He was a smart kid, so I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you could get away with it, but at the same time, it's just kind of like the principle of it. Like you spending all this money or your parents' money for what? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
That reminds me of a similar anecdote, if I can, real quick.
yeah,
So, and I won't name names. I kid you not, in my dorm room, there was a Wii, a PlayStation, and an Xbox. Okay, that were purchased by my roommates and my suite mates. I didn't own any of that. I just enjoyed just watching people play video games. But I'm like, my mom barely bought me a Sega Genesis growing up, so you work with what you got.
yeah,
Um, and and some of them would like the new when the new Halo game came out, they would spend the whole day playing Halo and like beating it. Like I'll wake up at 8 or 8:30, go to class, and then by the time I come back from my classes in the afternoon, they're still there playing Halo, and they're like, "Yeah, dude, I just skipped two of my classes. Screw it. This is more important. And I'm like, okay, man, you do you. I'm just
Yeah.
here. I'm just here trying to get my education. That's all.
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
Yep.
Um, okay, cool. So you kind of you're getting exposed to different cultures, both from a ethnicity standpoint and from a cultural standpoint. Um, you said the coursework is demand or financially you have just enough to like be done and get out of there in 4 years. Are you like stressed out at this point, like reaching the finish line? I know you got like senior design project and all this other stuff going on last year. How do you feel like mentally as far as like the workload? Do you feel like, you know what, engineering wasn't as bad, I was able to do it successfully? Or you feel like, yo, by the skin of my teeth, I barely made that?
So in the middle of my sophomore year, I was placed on academic probation. And so that I struggled. I know it's a surprise, right? But
I'm like, man, what?
yeah,
No Sheldon?
I was placed on academic
Lucky no
probation.
Sheldon?
Yep, yep, yep. See, that's what I'm telling you. Don't call me. Don't put me on Sheldon's level for now. Um, but no, so I struggled a lot. I would say because of the culture, getting used to the culture and getting used to everything, managing myself, but also the coursework was very demanding. Sophomore year, I was hitting a couple of courses that were taught by professors whose teaching style I didn't agree with. But looking back, maybe I could have done a better job at managing myself in those classes. But anyway, sophomore year I struggled quite a bit. But the thing is, I think sophomore year at Trinity is that experience is shared with other students. So there was a point where I was really considering transferring back to Houston to like a U of H or a St. Thomas. And I remember a conversation I had with my mom, or I think it was my mom and my sister, and they said, "No, you committed." That militant attitude coming back again. It's like, you committed to doing this thing. Don't waver now. It's hard right now, but it'll be worth it. Trust me. And so, I mean, I have to tell you, I think after my sophomore, it wasn't really until my junior year that I really figured out to an extent the whole college life thing. And it wasn't so much like partying or anything like that. It was just how to manage my time effectively, how to
Yeah.
adequately study for courses, like not cramming the night before, how not to do that. That took a while for me to develop, even though that, yes, had a propensity for math and science, but look, you can only wing it so much. Okay, that was my
Yeah.
problem. I was winging it too much. If I had prepared a little bit more, I would have done better in my classes. So after my sophomore year, I refocused and I got myself out of academic probation. And so after that, it was smoother sailing, I would have to say. But yeah, I mean, it was a struggle. It wasn't easy.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up because I mean, everybody's story is different. It's not going to be just peaches and cream, roses along the journey. I mean, you're gonna have your bumps and bruises in there along the way. So, what do you think was the biggest like change that you think you made? I know you said you kind of learned the system and everything like that, but was there like were you just like blowing off time, like okay, I'm not I have some free time. Like I'm just gonna go kick it with my friends. I'm gonna go to the rec or whatever. Or are you just like I know you said cramming was another part of it, so maybe not studying all the way. But
Hmm.
like, was there like one specific change, I guess, that you made, or one specific skill that you learned that really helped you turn the switch and go from academic probation into um, successful future PhD graduate?
That's a really good question. Making time to sit down and study, but not just study anywhere, but study in a place where you're going to focus. So I think after my sophomore year, what I started to do is dedicate more time, alone time in the library, just
Okay.
because studying and working and eating in my dorm room or with my friends was just not working. Um, Freshman year, all my roommates were and suite mates were non-engineers, so I have to say they had maybe more flexibility in their time. They would start playing Halo, and then I'm like, oh, I'll just watch this for 2 hours instead of doing my homework. But as soon as I started to not just like, have a dedicated schedule, but say, okay, today I'm going to, instead of going to my dorm room to eat or whatever, I'm going to go to the library. I'll take my dinner, go to the library, eat it, and then spend a couple hours, doing my homework.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so as simple as that. I don't think I had a dedicated schedule in my head. I just knew that I just needed a quiet space to work.
Yeah. But no, I think that's good that you said that because you kind of learned yourself, right? And your style and what works for you. So I mean, some people they can study and be efficient, like working in front of a TV. The TV's playing in the background, but maybe they're still working and they're just listening to the background noise. But other people, like you said, you might have to go to maybe get a private room or a study room in the library and just kind of block out all other distractions. So I
Yeah,
think part of that you kind of pointed out is like learning your style and
yeah,
what's going to work best for you specifically. Um, yeah, so I don't know. Halo may not work for you, playing Halo or watching Halo a couple hours a day and then working, trying to watch Halo at the same time probably doesn't work. So it's good that you were able to identify what you needed to do to make yourself successful.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I no one has a perfect journey through college. I think
Yeah.
those are rare, and I really, I like this opportunity to share this story, just to show people that I'm, even though I might, growing up, I might be, a genius or a prodigy. I had my struggles too. I'm human, you know.
Gotcha. Awesome, man. So, um, you graduate, undergrad, mechanical engineer,
Oh,
um,
engineering science. Sorry.
engineering science,
Yeah,
engineering science.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, so what's next? You're like, yo, I got my degree. What you about to do? Go back to Houston, oil and gas, or what are you gonna do?
Oh, at that point, I had already convinced myself I'm doing graduate school. I'm doing. I'm
Okay.
not. I'm not going to private industry. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go for it, here and now. Which, looking back, was not the recommended step to take, but it was a lesson I'm glad I learned. And very quickly, between my junior and my senior year, I did a research experience for undergraduate, or RU,
Hmm.
at the University of Cincinnati. And there is really where I informed myself on what graduate work kind of looks like and what a career in academia would look like. So there, I was at the University of Cincinnati. I worked with a professor in civil engineering, and we were doing experiments on a decommissioned box girder bridge. It was really cool. It was very hands-on work. It was awesome. I was able to work with other graduate students and other peers, students from all over the country, and it was actually a very diverse environment. Actually, a lot of black and brown people, and even split between the genders. It was actually really cool. So I that was a very positive experience, and that informed myself that I think I can do it. Let's go for it. And so after that, I applied to graduate school.
Nice.
Hmm.
So, two questions. To what kind of how did that opportunity come about to go work in a research lab in Cincinnati as an undergraduate student living in Houston? Was it like a specific program or something, or how'd you hear about it? And what
Quite
program was it?
quite frankly, it was one of those email letters I received from. I think I have to look back, but I believe my first exposure to RUs came from an email I received from KIP Academy. Since I am a KIP alum, I was signed up for an email newsletter for alumni. And every now and again, they would send out these emails announcing RUs, internships, interview prep, etc. And one day, I got an email letter, and I saw that there was an opportunity to do an RU at the University of Cincinnati. There was this big poster. And additionally, I think there's another email from my department at Trinity that said the same thing. And so I'm like, okay, this seems like a cool opportunity to do over the summer. And I, that'll be the first time living outside of Texas for me. So After talking to my mom and to my to my family, they thought, yeah, this would be a cool opportunity for you, so I went for it. Yeah, it was a 2 month summer program. I got to work with with a professor on a research project, and yeah, it was a nice experience.
Nice. So that's good. That kind of speaks to, I know we talked about it last time, the networking component, right? And part of it being that you're part of a KIP network, so you kind of got exposed to some opportunities that maybe others may not have had the privilege of. When you decided to go into grad school, were you applying to go to the University of Cincinnati, to stay at Trinity, or where were you looking at going for grad school?
So I was looking at, again, I don't know. Well, I'm not sure how sophisticated my thinking was at the time. I just knew that I would just gun ho, just go for it, PhD anywhere I could. So I applied to the University of Cincinnati because I thought I had connections there that maybe could help me out in getting my foot in the door. I applied to, I think I applied to UT Austin, and I applied to Rice for the second time. It's not the last time I applied to Rice University. Um, so I applied it, and you know what? I could talk about that later. Why I think I didn't make it to Rice, um, and I got into the University of Cincinnati. It wasn't a full ride. It was partially funded through university funds, and the issue there for me was I was out of state, so my tuition was higher than in-state tuition.
Mm.
So I had to take out a significant amount of loans. In that case, that was more like 50-50 in between loans and scholarships. And on top of that, there weren't any Pell grants or federal grants or state grants for graduate school. There,
Yeah.
that's almost non-existent, as I quickly learned. Um, but yeah, that I think yeah, those are the schools I applied to.
And were you looking at doing a master's or a PhD or what?
I was looking to do a master's just to get my feet wet in
Okay,
graduate school and see if that's really what I wanted.
gotcha. So real quick, how did things turn out? 'Cause I know you say you got 50-50 um, finances. So I kind of know the answers to this, but
Yeah, yeah.
how did things at UC go?
I dropped out after one semester.
Okay, college dropout.
Yeah,
Shout out to Kanye.
yeah, exactly. I'm a college dropout.
And was
So,
that why'd you make that decision, or how'd you make
so,
it?
so that was one of the hardest decisions I've had to make. But looking back, it's probably one of the best things I did for myself. At the time, I bit more than I could chew. I jumped into a situation I didn't fully understand because I was so ready. I thought I was so ready to go to graduate school. But at the same time, I learned a lot about the ins and outs about graduate school, about how funding works, about how thesis advisors work, and how students are selected for these programs. So it didn't work out. I went in without thinking how I was going to pay for college. I just thought I'll just take out loans. But I learned very quickly that semester, or back then they had it, they were in the quarter system. Oh yeah, so that was another thing. I was not used to the quarter system. So the quarter system is different from semester system,
Yeah.
where a quarter is much shorter, but attempts to cover the same amount of material as you would in a semester. So I was struggling immensely with that. On top of that, I did not have a thesis advisor to work with. And so that's
Okay.
something I learned the hard way. Is that when you want to go to graduate school, you want to make sure you get in touch with and agree with working with a specific professor in a specific research lab, or else you're not going to have any funding or any networking available to you. So those were hard lessons to take in, but those are ones that I carry every day that I'm more than willing to share with people that had no idea, students that had no idea how graduate school works. So I'm very happy to have been um, the trailblazer in that regard.
Yeah. No, that's really good input. And I'm glad you mentioned those things, especially the comments about grad school and how it works. 'Cause I don't think everybody always understands the ins and outs of it before jumping in. And it's not really something you learn as an undergrad necessarily, unless you're already like fully engaged with the research lab as an undergrad and you have somebody kind of coaching you along the way of, hey, this is how things work. If you get into grad school with no advisor, you're kind of like, it's like it's like you're trying to play a sport, a team sport. Everybody else is on a team already, and you're just kind of solo, like trying to figure out, okay, I can't play this. I can't win the same game if I'm not on a team.
Hmm.
So having a good coach or a good faculty advisor is critical to your success, both from a financial standpoint and from a planning standpoint. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Happy to share.
Okay, so you're in grad school real quick, and I'll just kind of put my closing thoughts on this, and then we'll come back next week and follow up. But yeah, so you made the decision to drop out. What was your mindset at that point? Because I know you kept saying your mom, like through osmosis, you kind of adopted her mindset, right? Of like,
Yeah.
yo, when you commit to something, you do it.
Yeah.
You give
Yeah.
your word, you do it. Like,
Yeah.
come hell or high water, you do it. So what was that experience like from a mental standpoint, and I guess also from an emotional standpoint once you had to drop out of University of Cincinnati?
Oh, it was debilitating. I felt at the time I felt like a failure because I didn't, commit or I didn't finish what I intended to start. But at that time, my mom, she was, actually it was my mom and my grandmother. Shout out to the moms. That really, at that point, they told me we prioritize your mental health and your general well-being more than your professional success. So I remember my mom told me that my grandmother, may she rest in peace, she told my mom, go pick up my grandson. He's sick. Go pick him up and bring him back to me so he can start to feel better. Because my family
From
knew,
Cincinnati?
huh? Yeah.
From Cincinnati? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, because my mom, she told me that she would have these conversations with my grandmother about my struggles in Cincinnati. And by the way, I just want to say, the friends and the connections I made with Cincinnati were absolutely great. It's just unfortunately the program just didn't work out. But no, my grandmother militantly told my mom, go pick up my grandson from Cincinnati and bring him back.
Yeah.
So at that point, they really tried to encourage me and tell me, hey, yeah, it didn't work out, but we'd rather have a healthy son here and maybe struggling professionally than a son that's sick trying to make it work in a situation that maybe wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
So that support was, looking back, was invaluable. I mean, you can't put a price on that.
Gotcha. Yeah, man, that's really important. I mean, I think a lot of times we set goals and where we try to be as persistent as possible. And of course, you set a goal. You don't set a goal that you're not expecting or hoping to accomplish. But sometimes life happens; things don't work out the way we plan them.
Hmm.
So I think it's good that you have that support, and that anybody has that support that they need to kind of uplift them and encourage them when they're down in the dumps. So I'm glad your mom and your grandma, I'm glad they were there to support you during that time. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but just for a kind of foreshadowing effort, what kind of happened or what was next on your plate? I feel like things kind of came full circle. What was kind of next on your plate after you left University of Cincinnati?
So I definitely left with a chip on my shoulder.
Okay.
With a chip on my shoulder. I felt like I was caught with my pants down. I felt like a failure. It took some time for me to accept that it was okay to fail, but I definitely ended up with a chip on my shoulder. And so at that point, I looked for a job to work while reapplying to graduate school. But maybe not maybe, but apply to graduate school, but in a more strategic way. Actually, think through, where I'm going to apply and what I'm going to apply for. So I think at that point, I really learned my lesson to, you want to put a little bit of thinking to your career path. A little bit, even though things might not work out. But a little bit of strategy always helps. So yeah, that's where my head was at that point.
Okay. And real quick, where'd you end up working at eventually while you were looking for jobs?
Is this the teaser for next week?
Yes, it's a teaser.
All right.
For next time
So
on.
custom journeys. I wound up working at KIP Academy again, but at this time as a teacher. I was a high school teacher, teaching Spanish to non-native speakers, and I did it for about a semester.
Okay.
Hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to put that little bit in there. I had that voiceover in my head playing. I don't know if you used to watch Dragon Ball Z, but at the end, it's always like next time on Custom Journeys. So okay, so awesome, Eli. So I think we're at a good stopping point here. We kind of went from grade school all the way up to your first attempt at grad school, even talking about some of the struggles and the hurdles that you had to overcome. And next time we'll kind of talk more about how you overcame that and got to where you're at today, to being the Mr. Dr. Eliseo Iglesias. Um, but real quick, before we go, or first, let me say thank you for sharing your journey, your story with us. I think it's very beneficial and powerful for people to hear. I think it provides a unique perspective, um, coming from a child of first generation immigrants from Central America, and all the things that you kind of set out to do and how you overcame some of the impediments along the way. So thank you for sharing that journey with us. Um, Real quick, is there any last touches or last thoughts that you want to provide the people?
Yeah, again, I need to be more specific. So they're from El Salvador, small country, no bigger than the state of Connecticut. My grandparents were farmers. My dad was a construction worker in his country, and my mom was a nurse. So, their working class attitude, I think, helped me overcome a lot of the adversity that I faced in my academic career path, even though, them themselves were not, academics. So I just want to put that thought out there that, a lot of education, comes from life experiences, not just, in the classroom. And those are just as valuable. And actually, those, in a lot of cases, help you push through academics, having those life experiences. So yeah, it's a little bit of both, and I'm very thankful that I have a foot in both those arenas. I think that really broadens my perspective, that allows me to empathize with a lot of different types of people from different backgrounds. So even though things didn't work out thus far in the journey that I'm talking about, I think it's building towards a more successful career, having a broader perspective on these things.
Nice, really good. So, yeah, man, I think you have even the backstory. I think you have a really strong, interesting backstory, even going back as far as your parents. So, yeah, I think we should definitely talk about that more in the future. Um, I would love to hear more about that. Real quick though, you did mention like the program that allowed you to be a research assistant as an undergrad, and you talked about some of the different scholarships or financial aid that you received as an undergrad. Do
Hmm.
you have any like, a lot of times we ask people for their homework assignment being a scholarship or a resource. It can be a resource too
Yeah.
that you would recommend. Even something like if there's something associated with KIP or Straight Jesuit or Trinity or anything. Do you have anything in mind that you would like to share with it? Even if it's something, a specific name of a resource that you shared today.
I think at the time there wasn't a specific outside scholarship that I received or an organization that helped me out. I remember being on fastweb.com. I'm not sure if that's still a thing, but
About to do a quick Google search over there.
yep, quick Google search. I don't know if it exists, but so
Fast
fastweb.
Web. I remember that.
Yeah, yeah. So FastWeb is definitely a resource I looked into, and I applied to a couple of scholarships at the time. Um, they didn't work out, but I would say to people listening, I think the biggest resource I had was my college advisor. She was the one that informed me of a lot of opportunities, specifically Trinity. So even if, the college advisor at your school doesn't reach out to you, you should reach out to them. Part of, and they should be open to you because that's part of their job. So that helped me immensely. I'm trying to think because I did the routine FAFSA application every year. I had to know my mom's taxes somehow every year.
I know, right?
But to be honest with you, Andrew, I'm kind of drawing a blank, and next time I'll be better prepared to have like a definite resource to share.
That's no problem, man.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of editing,
Yeah.
And we'll leave this comment in there. But yeah, that's the beauty of editing. You
Yeah.
could just on next week or next time we talk, we can plug that in there. But no, even the resources you provided, right? Those are still useful. I think some people just kind of go through college without taking advantage of all the resources that are there on campus. The people that are employed by the university are there to help you.
That's right.
So, I mean, even tapping into those people, their resources themselves, and they can kind of help direct you to different scholarships and stuff.
Hell, I remember applying to like the Coca-Cola scholarship. Like they were giving out scholarships too. There's one so Hispanic Scholarship Fund. That's also one that I applied to. I remember. I guess I don't remember them well because I didn't get them at the time.
Okay.
But there are definitely resources that are there for you. So that's just. Go ahead.
Go ahead, sir.
That was hsf.net, Hispanic Scholarship Fund. That's a resource you can apply to as well. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Real quick, what about did you do the Houston Livestock Rodeo
scholarship? No.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty big. It's like 25 grand or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're in Houston, what is this, March, whatever, 23rd, and it's the year of a pandemic, part 2. So I don't know if they're doing it right now or if it's already happened, but yeah, typically every year around springtime, the Houston Livestock Rodeo, they do like a scholarship award. So
gotcha.
Just something else for people to keep in mind out there.
On top of that, I think I got this from my college advisor. If you just type in any, profitable big corporation and then type scholarship in front of it in your internet search, you will probably find something to apply to. Okay. So that's something that students can do easily in their web browser. Just type in Coca-Cola or Amazon, and there's usually going to be some kind of foundation or scholarship available. I mean, a lot of this, as a researcher, a lot of it comes down to digging, It doesn't happen overnight. Networking doesn't happen overnight. You have to dig for these resources sometimes.
Awesome. Okay, so real quick, I would like to get your just kind of like a fun question, off-topic question.
Okay, go for it.
Well, it's STEM related. So I guess it's more general. What are your thoughts about Mars exploration? And are you going to be living on Mars with Elon Musk in the near future?
I don't know about with Elon, but at this point, I think I'm content with designing the ship that takes people there. I don't know if I want to go up there anymore. I think I've seen too many horror movies set in space to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But it's always been a dream of mine to work for NASA, if I'm being honest. It's always been a dream of mine.
Okay. We gotta work on that, man. We gotta make sure you get a shot, get you in the door. I think you would be a great fit. Seriously.
Okay.
So,
and do I need to be in shape?
I don't know, man. It might ask you to do some kind of simulations and stuff like that. You might want to make sure you are in shape, and just in case, I don't know what kind of testing they'll have you doing, but
give me more work to do, man. I don't appreciate that. But yeah, no, this was fun, Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah. No, most definitely. So I enjoyed it. I'm glad you came and shared part of your journey. We'll come back again next week and share the rest of it. But thanks again, Eli. It was great talking to you, and I really enjoyed it, man.
Likewise. Happy to share anytime.